Let me tell you a story that I've heard about 20 times at the various regionals and YCSs and locals that I've attended. A lot of times people would come up to me and say, "Hey Doug, I couldn't afford Ash Blossom, but when I saw that it was reprinted in the Legendary Collection Kaiba version, I bought 5 copies of that, and surprisingly I didn't pull any Ash Blossoms. Man, this game is too expensive." I've heard this story over and over and over and over again, and it still is a story that I hear even to this day, even though Legendary Collection Kaiba Edition is so far out. But at this point, people are still buying those to try to pull Ash Blossoms, and this really makes me sad. It makes me sad because at the beginning of every single opening that I do for a new set, I tell people if you can't afford a box, or if you can only afford one box, and that's all of your budget for Yu-Gi-Oh! For the entire month or for the entire 3 months, just buy the single instead. And I know how people get trapped into buying boxes. I know how they get enticed by people opening the money cards out of the set, but please do not buy sealed product if you are trying to make your money back. I tell people this all the time. If you are buying sealed product, just assume whatever money you're spending on that sealed product, you are not going to make back. I know a lot of people think this game is expensive, and it is expensive, but one of the ways that you can help it be less expensive is not by buying sealed product and just buying the singles instead. It might seem silly to spend $40 on an Ash Blossom from Legendary Collection Kaiba Edition when you could just buy the entire thing and get it for $30, but when you buy that $30 product and you don't pull the $40 card, well, now you're out $30 and you still don't have the card you were trying to pull in the first place. Now you got a whole bunch of garbage ultra rares that you can't use in any deck regardless. I mention all of this because in today's video we're going to analyze a pretty expensive Yu-Gi-Oh product that I sunk some money into last week. A case of Yu-Gi-Oh cards costs around $720. It includes 12 boxes of the newest set, in this case Savage Strike, which comes out to about $60 a box, which is a slight discount from what you would pay if you bought boxes individually. When I bought that case, I was not doing so under the pretense that I would make back all of my money and then some. That's why I put that section at the beginning of this video. When I bought that case, I was spending $700 fully being aware that I might not make back any of it or half of it, or I wouldn't plus off of the case. I did it for entertainment reasons only. I did it because it's my job to make videos about Yu-Gi-Oh! And also I did it because I've never opened a case before and I just wanted to see what the experience was like. For this video, I want to focus on 3 questions. The first question is, did I make my money back on this case? And there's a couple different criteria that I want to talk about in terms of what does it count for me making my money back. The second question is, could the average person make their money back on this particular case? And the third question is, could anyone make their money back on this case? These are all questions that I had going into purchasing this product, and they're ones that I want to try to answer as accurately as possible in this particular video. So let's answer that first question and talk about the reasons that I went into actually purchasing a case of Savage Strike. There were a couple reasons. The biggest reason is that there was an event the same day that it was legal, and that's a pretty big deal because whenever you're looking at a Yu-Gi-Oh set, the hype prices are at their highest the very first weekend of release. One of the things that's kept me from buying cases in the past is that I didn't have an outlet to actually unload the cards the very first week that they were around, and if you wait around a little bit too long, then many of the cards will go down by more than 50% of their initial value. It goes a little bit further than that though, because one of the biggest factors for purchasing a case of Savage Strike was that Pot of Extravagance was almost certainly going to be a secret rare. You see, I pre-ordered this case like many people before we knew the contents of the set, but I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh long enough to know that Extravagance as well as Thanos Dragon would most likely be secret rares, and I turned out to be correct on that. However, I was incorrect about my other assumption about this particular product, and that's that I assumed there would be 2 dangerous secret rares in this set. I'll talk about a little bit why it mattered that there weren't 2 dangerous secret rares, but overall I was assuming that out of the 8 secret rares, 4 of them would be pretty high valued. This ended up not being the case, and we'll talk about that, but overall that's why I bought a case of Savage Strike. I figured that there'd be 4 valuable secret rares that I could sell pretty easily, and a couple of them that I want to use in my decks as well. Now I will mention that one of the different criteria that I'm using for if I made my money back on this case is if I saved myself from having to buy any cards at hype prices on the Friday of YCS Chicago. This matters the most with Pot of Extravagance, a card that was very expensive on the floor of Chicago, ranging from around $75 to $85. So every single Pot of Extravagance that I pulled out of the case, I then subtracted $75 from what I would have had to spend on them if I didn't have them from the case. However, if you talk to me at YCS Chicago or you've been following me on Twitter as I was opening the case, you might know that the set ratios for Savage Strike are, I mean, there's no other better way to say this, excuse my French, royally and utterly fucked from the start. This creates a huge issue for players that are trying to buy cases, and I'm going to throw up all of the secret rares that I pulled on the screen right now so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The issue here is that the two best secret rares in the set are short printed. On average per case, I know that there's some people out there that have opened like 20 cases, you'll pull 2.4 copies of Pot of Extravagance and Thanos Dragon. This means that the majority of cases, over 50%, will have less than 3 copies. The issue here is that the 3 worst secret rares, the TG one, which is a laughable $1 on the secondary market, the Valkyrie one, and the Trickstar one, which are marginally better than $1, are all the exact opposite. They're overprinted. On average, you're pulling more than 3 copies per case. This is a huge issue for players that are trying to buy sealed product, especially if they're trying to buy an entire case, and especially if they're trying to buy individual boxes. This means if you're buying individual boxes, the chances of you making your money back, even if you get the boxes for $60, is almost zero, because the only 2 cards in the set that are worth more than the box are short printed. Now, there are 2 medium level secret rares. I count Witch's Strike and Psychic Wielder under that. Those ones were about what I expected, because on average you should hopefully pull 3 copies of every secret rare out of the set. It's expected that a couple of them you'll only pull 2 of, or you'll pull 4 of another one, but what's hilarious and what's sad about Savage Strike is that almost every single time, I mean, I'm sure there's some people that got more extravagance than these garbage secret rares, but in almost every single case that people opened, they pulled less copies of Extravagance and Thanos Dragon than every other secret rare in the box. What's particularly curious is that the same exact issues with card ratios can be found in the ultra rares as well as the secret rares. You see, in the ultra rares, there are basically 3 ones that people want to pull. You have Borreload Savage Dragon, you have the Danger Ogopogo, and also you have the Trickstar Honest that was a pretty big sleeper pick at YCS Chicago and was pretty successful. But those cards are the ones that I pulled the least out of, and you'll notice that I pulled 8 copies of 2 of the ultra rare spell cards that don't really sell for that much on the secondary market. Now, in the case of the ultra rares, you notice it a lot less because the cards are not nearly as expensive as the secret rare potential that you would have from pulling like an extra copy of Extravagance, but it's still worth mentioning that the ultra rares, at least the good ones, are harder to pull than the worst ones, and when you're looking at an entire case, that gives you a really good idea for the set ratios because you're opening basically every single card in the set. I'm sure there'll be a couple people that say, well, maybe your case was just an isolated incident, but luckily enough people have opened cases on YouTube and posted about them on Facebook that we know that this isn't true. Almost every single case has the exact same problems, and whether or not that Konami purposely did it isn't really the important factor here, because it still is affecting every single person that buys a case or box of Savage Strike. Anyway though, let's talk about numbers, because I'm sure that's what many of you are interested in hearing about, how much I actually made or lost from buying this product. It's important, I mean very important, to note that I did have to buy 1 extra copy of Extravagance for $75, which means that we're already starting off at -75. I figured when I bought a case of Savage Strike that at the very least it would save me from having to buy an Extravagance on the Friday of YC Chicago. I ended up being wrong, so I'm already -75. However, I did make some money off of this, and it's worth mentioning that I basically sold every single card I pulled. All the commons, which there's about 2,000 of them because there's 7 commons per pack times 24 times 12, about 2,000 commons that I got rid of, hundreds of super rares, a ton of ultra rares, all the secret rares. I basically sold every single card I pulled except the 2 Extravagance. Do you want to know how much I made? I made around $475. However, you have to subtract 75 of that because I bought 1 copy of Extravagance because I only pulled 2. So overall, out of the $720 that I spent, I made about $400. So I lost $320. It's worth mentioning that even if I would have pulled 1 more copy of Extravagance and 1 more copy of Thanos Dragon, I still would have lost around $150 to $200. So even best case scenario where I don't get screwed on ratios, I still am down $100 $200 or more. That is a pretty big deal and definitely goes to show that this case is a mess. However, there are several takeaways to make from this particular purchase, and I do want to shed light on those because they are very important when we're trying to answer the 3 questions that I posed at the beginning of the video. First off, I am an individual. I do not have a store. I do not have a company. This matters because one of the best ways to make your money back on cases is to actually sell the commons, rares, and supers for what they're worth on the secondary market. In general, the commons in a set are going to be worth around 12 to 15 cents, but when I, as an individual, are trying to get rid of those cards, I'm selling them at like pennies in bulk to vendors. The same goes for rares and super rares, a little bit more than just a penny, but overall, one of the best ways to make your money back on a case is to actually do the legwork and individually sell all the commons, rares, and super rares to people that want them. However, for me personally, I just do not have the time or resources to do that, so I was unable to actually accomplish that particular goal. It's also worth mentioning that if there would have been 2 $50 Danger Secret Rares in this set, like the last 2 sets, I would have come extremely close to that $720. Obviously, those cards could have been short printed as well, but I think overall, it's pretty hard for you to short print 4 Secret Rares. I think in the past, it's only been 2 of them. I know that the set that had Impermanence, and Permanence is a little bit harder to pull. I know that Dangerous Snake was a little bit harder to pull, but if you have 4 solid Secret Rares that are all worth like $50 or more, you have a pretty good chance of making your money back on that case. This brings us back to what I said at the beginning of the video, and that's those 3 questions that I was trying to answer. First off, did I make my money back on the cards that I got from the cards that I spent money on? The answer to this is a resounding no. I lost $300, and I do want to mention that I'm only looking at the cards that I spent, which is the entire case, and also the cards that I sold or cards that I didn't have to buy. Obviously, in my case, I made a ton of videos off of this, and I'll continue to make videos using these cards, like for deck profiles and other openings that I've done in the past, but overall, I'm only focusing on the cards themselves because that's what I was trying to look at when I was buying this case. The second question is, could the average person make their money back on this product? And the answer, I still believe, is no, for the exact same reasons that I couldn't make my money back, and that's that the average person simply does not have the time or the resources to sell all of the commons and rares and super rares for their full value on the secondary market because, I mean, just individuals just don't have that kind of time. They don't have stores set up. That's a pretty big deal, and also every single case had the same ratio problems, which meant that if you were buying a case, the chances were that it would be just as bad as mine in terms of the copies of Extravagance and Thanos Dragon. And lastly, could anyone make their money back on a case of Savage Strike? And the answer is yes. Stores or people that have the resources to sell the cards to maybe friends or other people, those are the people that will actually be able to make their money back on the cases. I would say I probably missed out on about $100 or $200 from not selling the commons, rares, and supers for their full value, which means if you have access to different avenues like TCG Player or eBay or people at your locals that will buy the cards at full price, that really makes it a lot easier to sort of beat the case in terms of making your money back. However, I would say that most people buying cases do not have access to those resources, which means that very few people can actually make their money back from purchasing a case of Savage Strike. Overall, it was still a fun experiment, and I'm glad that I did it, if only just to make this video and the other box opening videos, and I'll be able to do some more deck profiles as well. There are some cool cards in there like Time Thief, some Adulches, and Subterrors, but still, I hope you learned something from this. I hope if you're someone that thinks this game is really expensive, but you continue to buy boxes, I hope you realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't spend that money on sealed product that gives me a random chance of getting what I want. Maybe I should just spend money on the cards that I know that I need for my decks. When you're buying a box of cards, you certainly can get like a higher high or a lower low, depending on which secret rares you pull, but whenever you're buying a case of the set, you should be getting the best representation for how valuable the case is, because you should be getting an even ratio, an even split of all the cards in the set. Because all of the cases in this set pretty much minus in terms of how much money you can make out of them for the average person, I would say it is a very, very bad idea to buy Savage Strike as a sealed product, and you definitely should just stick to buying the single cards from sites like TCG Player and eBay, or your friends that bought boxes and were trying to make their money back. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed today's discussion video on this case of Savage Strike. I probably won't be doing it again, but I hope you learned something along the way. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Goodbye.